Hello everyone, welcome in. As promised in the last video, we're going to go through the best and worst arguments that the defense put forth in their answer brief to the Supreme Court. A quick recap: the district judge in Alexee Trevizo's case did indeed suppress essentially all medical evidence that was said, right? She did keep in the medical records, which is extremely odd, but she suppressed everything else that Alexee could have said to any of her providers, anything said in the hospital room, on body cam, all of that, which has caused a big ruckus. A lot of people to think that the entire case is basically thrown out the window should the state not have that evidence. I don't really think that the case is a goner, even if they didn't somehow end up with this evidence back. I personally am of the belief that the district court judge completely erred when suppressing all this evidence. I think that the law is pretty clear. It's on the state side, and I think there's some serious indicators that the defense is extremely desperate to keep this very lucky decision that they were able to get out of this district judge, to put it very kindly. So without further ado, let's jump into the best argument, and then we'll get into the worst argument, and then we have honorable mention for, the worst of the worst. All right, fair is fair. Their best argument, even though there is some issue technically, which I'll get into, is that Alexee was not free to leave. Okay, I don't know about confined to her hospital room. She could have got up and left at any point. She was told by the doctor that, you're bleeding and you need to get on a flight. But essentially, she could have denied care, right? She'd have to sign some papers and be like, I'm out of here. Well, the police officers told her she couldn't, right? They said, you're not trying to leave. You ain't leaving here. We're going to be in here with you. At that moment, she's technically being investigated, in my opinion, because they've made the determination that she is a suspect. Now I think we turn off the faucet. And as soon as this moment here on screen, this is the exact moment that they're told Alexee's detained, I think that's when everything shuts down. That's just my opinion, despite her not being interrogated, okay? The only person who does an interrogation on Alexee is her mom, which I titled my video that when we, that's what I titled my video rather, when I tried to break down everything that was said in between them when the officer was calling in their IDs. It was definitely an interrogation via Rosa. And if that's in, it's very hard to hear. I don't really find it extremely compelling because, it's you can kind of make arguments on how clear the audio is, in my opinion. I tried to do my best. I've tried to have other people listen in and see what they heard. And, that was the best we could come up with. But when it comes to that moment, I don't really think it's fair. And I know it sounds kind of crazy because I'm the biggest proponent of the state has they deserve everything up until that moment. I will give them that. I know she's not being asked questions by the officer, but she is being asked questions by her mother. And she basically pulls everything out of Alexee as far as exactly allegedly what happened in the bathroom, because we still don't know what truth is being told, right? That's just her story, and we can choose to believe what Alexee says or not, which take with a grain of salt. The autopsy does say that the baby was born alive, and Alexee immediately, when confronted with the death of the baby, said nothing was breathing. And so I think that you can take what she says with a grain of salt, just my opinion. So who knows if her story to Rosa was true or not. But anyways, the point stands that someone's words being used against them is a very precarious thing in the law. And I do err on the side of caution that we should protect the speech of the defendant. And I say, as soon as they say she's detained, you turn it off. Now, that's not really falling in line with an interrogation, but still, let's err on the side of caution. And I would say that's okay. I would be okay with that, despite her getting grilled by Rosa and basically explaining everything about the toilet and all that stuff, which oddly enough, They want all that out, but Gary Mitchell has said publicly that that's what happened, that the baby was delivered into the commode, is how he put it with his fancy words. So I don't really, I mean, you've said that publicly as her attorney, you know what I mean? And so just a little interesting that, that's the one thing that they kind of pulled out of her in the moment that I think should be gone. Well, her attorney has said that publicly. So there's a lot of give and take in this. I do like to err on the side of caution, and I would concede to that moment if I was them. But hey, that's just me. I don't have to take every ounce of flesh. You know what I mean? I can be strategic with other things and try to preserve the rights of the defendant as much as possible, at least in my opinion. But what do I know? I'm just a lowly paralegal on the internet. Okay, so worst argument, in my opinion, is Dr. Vasquez abandoned, very important word, her role as a physician in favor of advancing the interests of law enforcement. Now, they're very set on this, very, very set. Why? Because they need to frame the doctor's role as that of a law enforcement and make it seem as though the doctor was interrogating Alexee for the, Miranda privileges to be applied to Alexee's statements. They have two fronts that they're trying to attack this same issue on, essentially saying the doctor's conversations with Alexee are privileged, period, and the doctor magically also turns into a proponent of the law and is now helping to apprehend this suspect known as Alexee Trevizo. They're trying to cover all their bases with this, but the facts of the matter kind of tell a different story. And I'm saying kind of, and that's a little bit generous. The facts of the matter, I think, completely spell out a different story here. Let's just say 9 minutes and 12 seconds is the exact amount of time from which the doctor exits the treatment room after pronouncing baby Alex dead. She spends a brief couple of seconds consoling the janitor who ultimately did find baby Alex, encapsulated in the trash bag. And then the doctor moves on and basically kind of goes off camera from the hallway hospital footage. In 9 minutes and 12 seconds from that moment, the doctor reappears on police body cam footage. Now, that's extremely fast. The police are called extremely quickly, minutes after baby Alex has been pronounced dead and everyone's scrambling and, kind of reconciling what's happening and grabbing the phone, calling 911. So the police get there extremely quickly. The doctor has spent this 9 minutes and 12 seconds securing a flight on a helicopter for Alexee to go to a better facility that can actually treat her for her postpartum hemorrhaging. Now, it seems reasonable that in that time the doctor was setting up getting Alexee admitted there, which when the doctor walks up to the police officers and the first thing she says to them, her exact words are, "Okay, officers, but the patient is bleeding profusely, and I don't know if she delivered a placenta. Her care is of the utmost right now. I need her life flighted to Loveless." She's realizing that the police want to start an investigation, but she needs to get the suspect out of here. And that's complete opposite of Dr. Vasquez abandoning her role in favor of advancing the interests of law enforcement. So when I say the facts and figures literally disprove this argument to its fullest, it completely does. Because though Dr. Vasquez had just seen the unfortunate sight of baby Alex being encapsulated in that trash bag, pronouncing a baby dead, and then having to move on and save the mother who put the baby in that bag, if that's not being the utmost professional and heroic person that you can think of in that moment, then I actually don't know who else you can think of, because I do know that people say, don't judge other people, right? She didn't. She didn't immediately jump into judging Alexee. She immediately jumped into helping Alexee. So this argument, it's a really, really bad argument, in my opinion. And if they are granted oral arguments, I do think this will be destroyed. I really think hearing a serious throwdown of these facts on this issue will completely negate the doctor being considered law enforcement. And the reason they need that is because law enforcement technically do have a right to go and investigate this potential murder at the moment and go into Alexee's room. And her spontaneous utterances in front of law enforcement officers are not subject to Miranda or privilege. And so that's why they're kind of having to paint this picture in the way that they are, which gets us to honorable mention and just a few facts I'd like to address before we really are starting to come to a close of this Supreme Court series that we've been going through here. All right, for honorable mention of the worst argument, and it has to be honorable mention because technically it shouldn't have been an argument because it's not an argument of the law, it's an argument of the facts, which is up to the fact finder, the jury, which is something we have said multiple times here, and it was very nice at the end of the last video when we got to see the state's motion to supplement the record with the testimony of the medical examiner at the preliminary hearing in this case, and to make sure that the Supreme Court gets to see the autopsy and see that baby Alex's death was deemed a homicide by entrapment in the bag, and that there's multiple indications in the autopsy that showed that baby Alex was indeed born alive. Now, that's a big deal in this case, obviously, because this is a murder case. That argument was really misplaced and really poor taste given the situation. I understand that the defense attorneys have to do what they have to do, but that was a really low blow based off the evidence, and you should know that that's for court, not for trying to influence the Supreme Court, which will bring me to my next point of influencing the Supreme Court. Now, everyone brace yourself for this, as you will see on the left-hand side of the screen, the movements for the defense. Now, these are essentially people who have decided to write, amicus briefs, or which means friend of the court. They've decided to write briefs on behalf of defending Alexee and not allowing this evidence back in, which before everyone gets up in arms and annoyed with the ACLU, the College of Obstetricians, and the National Police Accountability Project, to name them all, before you get upset with them, first and foremost, you must understand that this is the move of a very desperate side. Having to have amicus briefs filed when the facts of the case are what they are lead you to believe that they are extremely worried, they being the defense, that all of this evidence is going to be given back to the state, that they have to heavily influence the Supreme Court in ways other than law. Now, at the very bottom of the screen, where the question marks are, you'll see that this is actually pulled from something that the district judge who threw out all this evidence and suppressed it all heavily relied on, was this statute. Now, clearly in that statute, it does say that a custodian of classified information, meaning privileged medical information, may furnish it upon request to a governmental agency. So I'm just extremely confused where the delineation of statements made don't fall under the same requirement of things that can be given to a police officer, especially when they pertain to potential child abuse, which is the other law that the district judge seemed to completely ignore, that police are allowed to show up and investigate, and hospital staff, mental health providers, anyone who is considered a privileged source must give up any and all information pertaining to child abuse to these people. So those statements made to the medical providers do not fall under the same category as privileged when a child has been abused. It's been codified in New Mexico law before when someone who confessed to assaulting a child in a therapy setting, that confession to their therapist was used against them, and they were there to actively seek help for that problem, allegedly, and it still was used against them, which I mentioned because I don't believe that Alexee was actually there seeking help, as evidenced by her not explaining a plausible reason for her bleeding profusely to her doctor. It seems like Alexee really just didn't want anyone to know the truth, even if her own life was dependent on it. And so I do think that that is a big portion of the whole reason that medical privilege exists, is for people who want to keep things secret, which Alexee wanted to keep this secret from her doctors too. So I think the privilege is out the window, but that's just my opinion. The Supreme Court series for this case is very likely coming to an end here soon. The state's reply is due very, very soon here in the next week. And though the defense has requested oral argument, it is not certain that there will be a date set for oral argument in this case. If there is, most oral arguments in New Mexico are streamed, and you can watch the oral argument via their website. And so if there is oral argument and we are able to stream it, we will definitely be watching oral argument together or evaluating it after it happens. However it turns out, especially if we are allowed to see it, we're watching it here. If it's public, we're covering it here on this channel. So also, I just love oral argument. I think it is a really, really cool and interesting, facet of law. It's a really different and interesting skills. So if we get to see oral argument in action, it will be awesome, because everyone who really truly follows, the facts in this case, you'll see them hitting and missing super hard on basically common sense, right? The Supreme Court is going to want to get down to what is the law and what is right and wrong in this case. Who has the best facts to back up their claims? Let's go. And it's pretty exciting. So once the state responds here, we will see if there's oral argument. If not, we'll just be awaiting the Supreme Court's decision on if they reverse the suppression that the district court judge in this case did with this evidence. I am going to remain as steadfast and right down the middle as possible and not get my hopes up that all this evidence will come back. But I do feel extremely confident in the state's case. I think that the defense knows that they got lucky. That's just my opinion. And they're very worried that when, how do I say this nicely as to not insult the district judge, but when higher legal minds take a look at the issues, that they will come to a completely different conclusion. And I think that we can pretty much at that point say that the hourglass has been turned over and the clock's ticking, because I do think that Team Trevizo, the defense team, has been able to push this off for quite some time. With all of this legal battling, but it all may be for naught. And as soon as trial is set, I'm of the firm belief that Alexee will be found guilty, which means she will be subjected to a completely stark reality check. Like, she's been living with this over her head, but with her life going on pretty much as normal. Yes, her college literally petitioned to the students to have her not go there, so her life's not completely normal, but she's not living a life far different than the average majority of people taking online classes and living at home at your parents' house at her age. So despite the big public blemish on Alexee, her life is relatively normal. By the end of this, Alexee is likely to be walked out of the courtroom as soon as the jury returns their guilty verdict in cuffs and never be returned to society. It's a mandatory life in prison sentence for a guilty verdict of murder in the first degree via the abuse of a child in New Mexico. So she will be in prison for life, and it will happen extremely quick. I'm of the firm belief, if you've watched my defense comparison videos, I pick out very specific defenses that have kind of a similar tune as Alexee's, it seems to be going with, as well as a very quick guilty verdict coming because of those absurd defenses. I personally think Alexee will be found guilty in a matter of hours, and her whole life is going to change by the end of this trial. That's just my opinion. But I do think that the defense is really gearing up, because it's all downhill for the defense from here. Thank you so much if you made it this far in this video. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I do genuinely enjoy the conversation. If you're interested in following cases like the Alexee Trevizo case to trial, please subscribe because I'll be covering it all along the way with a legal focus. It's your Friday. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.
You bluffing, I knock the stuffing out your egg McMuffin while you huffing and puffing. I'm biting crime like McGruffin. I don't bite no crimes, I don't write no rhymes, I freestyle. Meanwhile, back to the lab. Got my own car, so I don't need a cab.